So a bit of a fun fact about James Kiefner is that when I was a kid, most of my favorite movies had titles like The Lost Bladesman or Deadly Ninja 1 through 7, or perhaps slightly less subtly, The Guy with the Secret Kung Fu. See, I really dig kung fu flicks. I especially like them because a lot of them kind of have the same plot. You know, you've got this kind of wimpy, headstrong kid who runs away from home, learns some sweet kung fu from an elderly master, and comes back to triumph over himself and over injustice. And I loved that narrative because I am and always have been a wimpy, headstrong young kid with two extremely belligerent older brothers. So I started just watching dozens, hundreds of kung fu movies. And from them, I started learning both martial arts and really dramatic, poorly dubbed Chinese. It worked. Anyways, about a year ago, I found myself in what you might call a quarter-life crisis. You know, I kind of felt I was losing control over certain parts of my life. I was burning out, basically. So I figured, like most people in various life crises do, that I would pursue this guilty pleasure of mine, and I would make my life into a kung fu movie. I mean, I had all that I really needed. I had a very tenuous grasp of overly dramatic, poorly dubbed Chinese. Perfect. I bought myself a one-way ticket to Beijing to learn kung fu. You know, a bunch of extraneous details aside, about 6 months and a 24-hour train ride later, I found myself standing in front of a 600-year-old temple in the Wudang mountain range in China. And I knew that I'd found my way into a kung fu flick when I was walking down the street day one and I saw these two kids flirting with each other in the street by just throwing these blisteringly fast roundhouse kicks at each other's heads. It was literally a town built around the culture and the industry of kung fu. But you know, the days went by and I gradually came to realize that kung fu requires this level of strength and flexibility that I've never encountered my entire life. Most of my fellow students had been there for years, and I couldn't come anywhere close to their level. The stretching and the workouts just ripped my legs apart to the point that I would rather sleep at the foot of a flight of stairs than risk the agony of walking up the stairs to get to my bed. And it never really got any better at all. But one of my many turning points came during a Monday morning sparring practice. And the sparring that I knew in the US is a very controlled process. It's, you know, you have your pads and your gloves and your refs and your mats and the whole 9 yards. But in China, they might wear gloves if they were feeling kind of wimpy that day. So before my first bout, I'm terrified. You know, I've brought this mouth guard from home just in case this happened, but I can't wear it. Right? I'm supposed to be this headstrong, slightly wild newcomer whose strength and dedication gradually wins over the elderly master who then teaches me the ways of the universe. I can't wear a mouth guard. They're going to think I'm weak. So I turn to the guy next to me and I say something to that effect, and he looks at me like I'm crazy, and he goes, "Why do you care? Wear the mouth guard if you want. You aren't going to break your jaw. Or don't wear it if it's uncomfortable. But they don't matter at all. Nobody cares about you. Take your ego out of this." Thanks, man. Yeah. So it makes sense, though. You know, there's this Taoist ideal of the uncarved block. The uncarved block is the perfect state of something. You know, a piece of wood that hasn't been changed is perfect because it exists in pure potential and balance. It's literally everything at the same time. And by imposing his own form onto the block, the sculptor only allows it to be appreciated in one way. So here I was with this really solid idea of exactly how my experience was supposed to go, but I could only experience it in that way and just be completely frustrated otherwise. So I took my ego out and I put my mouth guard in, and tossed my dukes up, went up to this bout, and I woke up about 2 minutes later, just pouring blood out of my almost shattered nose. And it was beautiful. It was kung fu, and by removing my form from that, from my expectations from that, I could actually experience it and take some kind of primal joy in all of it. Anyways, I really dig swords. I'm the captain of the fencing team here at Tufts, and between martial arts and the military, I'm going to be spending a lot of my life around the culture of a sword. But the thing that I really like about swords are that they're just this enormous embodied paradox. You know, a sword can attack and it can defend, it can kill and it can save, it can move and it can stand still, and it does a lot of these things all at the same time. You know, it actually really harkens back to that uncarved block, that allegory for how everything kind of exists in everything else. Like, we have to carve this block out, right? We have to put some kind of label or description on the universe so that we can actually experience it. But in the end, there has to be some kind of aggression in your defense, and there has to be some kind of defense in your attack. Just like darkness without light is just this useless abyss, and light without shadows is just blinding. So when you really bring it down to it, there's not a huge difference between these opposites. It's just the way that you, as the fighter or the observer, decide to carve them out. Anyways, so I went into town one day to one of the many weapons shops that line the streets of Wudang, and I bought this magic sword. And it's beautiful. It's got this perfectly balanced folded steel blade, and when the light catches it just right, it looks like there are just streaks of fire moving all the way to the tip. And I trained with this weapon every day for about a month until my arms burned, my legs ached. And every night before I went to bed or ate, I would make sure that it was cleaned and oiled perfectly. But there's a problem, because I had to get back to Beijing, which is 1,000 miles away, and now bear with me, apparently it's illegal to take weapons on public transportation in China. Crazy. So I had to make it 1,000 miles, and I couldn't take a train or a bus or a plane. And I don't know when the last time you picked up a hitchhiker with a sword was, but don't. It's a bad idea. So I needed to find my way across the country of China, and I had about 3 weeks to do it. So I went out and I bought a motorcycle. Or not so much a motorcycle as the kind of large, very illegal dirt bike endemic to a lot of rural communities, but it's red and it goes fast. And that's all I really cared about. And I spent the next couple weeks preparing for this trip. You know, I studied basic maintenance. I taught myself how to ride a motorcycle, which seems useful. And I came up with this route, about 1,200 miles back towards Beijing through the mountains of China. And 2 weeks later, I set off in this roar of dust and youthful naivete. Literally 45 minutes later, I was completely lost. You see, Chinese highways are generally pretty poorly marked, and even if they were well marked, I didn't have a map. What I did have was an old broken compass that I'd bought off of a bitter Canadian expat, and I knew that I had to go north until I started speaking Russian, turn around, backtrack a bit, bang a left, and stop when I hit an ocean. I just had to get to Beijing. But you know, first I ran out of gas in the middle of the mountains. I lost my phone, all of my money, and the legal title to the bike. I spent a very tense 6 hours fighting my way through landslides in the Shuishan mountain range. I crashed my bike twice. I got caught in freak rainstorms. I got taken into custody by the Chinese police for trespassing. That was the first day. And the next day, after bumming a tank of gas off of my newfound Chinese police friends, I took off once again, and my route this day took me onto this grand 8-lane parade boulevard that stretched miles into the heart of this enormous and entirely empty city. There were no people in the city. There were no cars. There were no clotheslines. There were just enormous gray apartment blocks desperately reaching for the sky as far as the eye could see. I was completely lost. I wandered that limbo for hours until finally I ran into this wizened old lady running a noodle stand by the side of the road. And we chatted for a while, and she doesn't know how to leave either. Anyways, I finally just took a direction and just stuck with it, fighting my way through abandoned construction sites and lots, but I never found any highway. I was furious with myself. Here I had this route I was supposed to follow, this plan I was supposed to take, but here I was broke, I was lost, I was completely alone in a foreign country. I mean, my legs were on fire, my body was covered in bruises, and the universe was conspiring against me. And as soon as that thought crossed my mind, I realized how selfish it is. Take your ego out, look at it again. So I did. And without my form in it, it had so much more potential. When it rains, landslides happen. Old highways are generally pretty poorly marked. When you trespass, apparently you get arrested. None of this had to do with me personally. It's just nature, whether human or otherwise. The same physical forces that let a rainbow rise after a rainstorm caused those landslides. And the same beautiful human desires that lead a mother to provide for herself and her children led somebody to take that money that I just left sitting there in rural China. There's a little bit of everything in every experience, but I just blinded myself to all of it by assuming that it was about me. So I took to the road again. I just wandered vaguely north through the backcountry, asking directions along the way. There was no wrong way for me to go because I still don't know if there was a right way for me to go. So I just kind of detached myself from needing to go a certain way. And I met people. I met excited children and ancient farmers who had never seen a white man before. I arm wrestled a friendly trucker just north of Taoyuan for some directions. I lost on purpose. And I could have gotten lost another way and seen other things, but this is just the way it went. Which kind of brings me back to my big point, which is that every experience is worthwhile. They all teach us about ourselves or about other people or about the world around us. All it takes is this kind of step back and a gentle appreciation for capital E experience. Experience that you don't need to qualify by calling it right or wrong or justify by calling it a blessing in disguise. You could graduate college and go right to grad school. Or you could wind up on your parents' couch for a bit. You could take a chance and move out west with that girl you just fell for and get your heart broken. Or you might live happily ever after. It doesn't really matter. What truly matters is that you really fundamentally drowned yourself in every single extreme, in every single feeling, and in every single experience. Because here's the thing, all I'd really wanted out of this was some kind of control over my life, but the only control that we have is the ability to label this universe, to carve this block in any way that we choose. There's this quote from Kerouac's book, On the Road. He was alone in the doorway digging the street. Bitterness, recriminations, advice, morality, sadness, all of this was behind him, and ahead of him was the ragged and ecstatic joy of pure being. Ultimately, I think that's what got me through this. What really brought me out on the other end alive was just being able to step back and take some kind of primal joy in this capital E experience, because it's about more than just you, It's about you made up of all of the beauty and joy and anger and silence that fill the universe, just digging the universe. There's this old Taoist proverb that the traveler with no destination can never be lost. So just remove your destination. Explore the world as it is, not as you want or need it to be. It has so much more potential that way, and you, thinking and feeling human being that you are, you get to experience it in every possible way. What a blessing. What a fundamental privilege. So have fun with it.